Thank you all for being here. Thank you for inviting us. Great opportunity to get word out on a really exciting event. Again, Dr. Mason last summer was able to do kind of a working vacation, I guess, and he snagged a really wonderful speaker for us in the process. But I guess you want me to kind of mention a few things first, or do you want to kind of talk about the speaker?
Let me just introduce him and I'll let you take
over.
over.
Do that then.
Yeah, I was. Now he makes it sound like I didn't do anything last summer. I taught 4 summer classes, and then my wife and I, in case Dee's watching this, yeah, we worked on our house. We redid our floors. Kurt knows about that. So it wasn't like I had just that much fun. No, it was a lot of. We were able to go to Nashville as part of something else we had to do for our family. Our kids were in Cincinnati with some folks, and while we were there, we were able to speak with Mr. Howard Cattell, who will be our speaker, and he is the CEO and the manager of the Hermitage, which of course is Jackson's home. Have any of y'all been to the Hermitage in Nashville? It's worth going to see. They're really super people there. Mr. Cattell is really fabulous. One of his aides, a young lady named Erin Adams, was very helpful to us, and so they showed us around. We said, hey, we'd love to have y'all come and be part of our presidential lecture series. So it's going to be from 12 to 1. That's kind of the open period. The university did mail some.
You mean like this?
Yes, yeah, some invites. If you received an invite, please come at 11 o'clock. If you received one of those invites, if not, then please come at 12 o'clock, and we're having kind of 2 programs. And so, but anyway, we'd love to have everybody come out. Jackson's such an important figure in our history. Dr. Schmaltz will tell you a little bit more about Mr. Cattell and some specifics on the program, but I just want to invite everybody to come out. I think it'll be really interesting, and certainly one of our more colorful presidents, Andrew Jackson.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Mason.
Thank you.
Yeah, we want to thank Skeeter Burden Foundation also for helping out with this initial luncheon at 11 o'clock, and then of course it's tied in with our 12 o'clock public talk. So again, we hope to see some of the folks there. Again, I really appreciate what Dr. Mason does in organizing these annual talks, the presidential lecture series being one of them, Constitution Day in the fall each year as being the other. Just a few comments again. Yeah, our talk is next Tuesday the 13th at noon. I do want to mention, though, kind of tied in with that, we do have a display case that was brought over by the Hermitage. It just arrived in the mail a couple of days, but it was set up at our Alva campus University Library. It's in the by the main desk area there, and it's going to be up. I think it's going to be displayed up until I think next Wednesday. So the day after the event, it'll be taken down. So it's up for the next several days. But it's a display, kind of traveling exhibit on the Jackson legacy and the Hermitage. So you get a chance to stop by the Alva campus at the library, stop by the main desk area, at least before next Wednesday. So that's kind of a neat thing. I don't know if we've ever had anything like that before at the university. So I think they covered the cost for that, the Hermitage, which is fantastically generous. And again, a couple of quick comments about. Again, I think one of the rationales that Dr. Mason had for also inviting Jackson, besides visiting Nashville, is the fact that as of this past year, it was the 250th anniversary of Jackson's birthday. It was actually the Ides of March 15th, 2017. So we're still technically in the 250th anniversary celebration, at least until next week. So we were able to kind of tie that in with that 250th anniversary. Again, a little about Jackson here. He was born actually in South Carolina. He's the son of Scots-Irish immigrants. He actually was a Revolutionary War veteran. He was barely a teenager in the 1770s, 1780s when he was fighting on the American side, the Patriot side. He was actually an orphan during that period as well. Later, he heads west, became a Tennessee pioneer. He becomes associated with the early American West. Became a frontier lawyer, military leader, first hero of New Orleans in the War of 1812, and later a statesman. He's a very complex man, however, and controversial in some respects, even today. And even at his time, he was a little bit of a controversial figure, but he's a very complex personality. Again, he became kind of associated with the common people, kind of a populist president. He took his role as kind of represented the people very seriously. It's rather simplistic, though, because although he was born actually in poverty or from very humble beginnings, He was a real success story later in life. So he kind of rose, rose through the ranks here, became very wealthy, became a plantation owner. He did become a slave owner, but he certainly came from a humble background. He was known as kind of a common man. He had little formal education, but he was very well self-educated. He learned to read and write at an early age. He became a lawyer, a judge. He maintained a very extensive personal library, and I'm sure that's probably the Hermitage there, stored there. So he's kind of a man of contradictions here. And by the way, I mentioned he did kind of grow up on the western frontier after heading west. But by the time he had become a politician, he became very dignified, very sophisticated, really kind of a cultured person. So he's a little bit of both worlds, kind of a common man, but also kind of I guess you could say like a natural aristocracy, Thomas Jefferson. So he kind of worked his way up. But we always have these kind of dichotomies. He's a little bit of both things. So it's kind of interesting. So that'll probably come up in some of the discussion here next week. But one other thing I want to mention about his legacy, and something I know Dr. Mason's talked about, I think probably Jackson's probably one of the first truly strong, I wouldn't call him imperial presidency, but he's certainly one of the first strong executives in our nation's history. Later you'll see that with Lincoln, and of course, especially for Teddy Roosevelt into the 20th century. But he was really the first to utilize the veto. He became known as King Veto, or King Andrew I. His opponents would call him that. But he certainly redefined the office of the president, very strong executive, helped inspire future presidents. Again, he's kind of a controversial figure. Today we kind of think of the Indian Removal Act, probably one of his blemishes on his record, removal of the southeastern tribes. Certainly he was a slaveholder. But again, we often forget also he helped preserve the Union. Even though he probably had sympathies with some of the states' rights folks, especially in South Carolina, where he came from, he did put his foot down from a possible secession movement. He had the Force Bill and all that implemented. And so he realized it was important to keep the Union together. Also, he did see himself as kind of a man of the common people. And by the 1820s and 30s, in the age of Jackson, we do have a growing democratization of the country. We get rid of the last property qualifications. Probably a good amount of the religious qualifications for holding office are also eliminated. So by the 1820s and 30s at the state and federal level, for the first time, you have white males able to vote and hold office. And of course, that is significant because not everybody was able to do that, even white males, until that period. Now later, of course, that will expand to other groups. It's just going to take some steps here. But that was already going on. He took that very seriously. But he's kind of known as a populist president. Of course, that issue of populism has come up in recent discussions, both here and abroad. You have globalization and then the reactions to that. So I think this is kind of a timely topic. I guess make a couple last comments about Mr. Cattell. He's a really interesting figure. I guess he's very down to earth there when you met with him, but he's really had an interesting career. He's been involved in historic preservation, land conservation. As I said, he's the president and CEO of the Hermitage, basically the Andrew Jackson Foundation that operates the Hermitage in Nashville, Tennessee. And for several years before that, being in Nashville, he was the executive director at the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation in Virginia. For some of my ancestors were around the Shenandoah Valley, the Boone family. He's also the foundation. The Shenandoah Group was also involved as the manager of the National Historic District in the Shenandoah Battlefields area as well. It's really interesting. He also has, as I said, has a career in historic preservation and also in the history discipline. And this goes back for almost 30 years. He also was the assistant director of the Providence, Rhode Island Preservation Society. Later on, he also worked at the Preservation Coalition of Greater Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, and the executive director of the Chestnut Hill Conservancy in also in Philadelphia. He's kind of worked his way south. He's from Michigan, so he's working his way a little southward over the years. He has a degree in urban planning from Michigan State University, but his graduate studies were in architectural history and historic preservation at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. So he's got really an interesting public history, public sector background, and I think that's going to be a wonderful opportunity to get to meet with him. Is there anything else we want to add to that at all to the event?
No, I can't think of anything.
Okay.
I really would encourage
Yeah.
y'all to go and see the displays in the
Yeah.
library. I'm glad there's
Get that visual aspect of it.
Yeah, they're part of a traveling exhibit from the Tennessee State Library Association, and they were gracious enough to provide the shipping and everything. And they're just a series of display panels, but they're definitely informative and they're really high quality and they're worth seeing. So, if you get a chance to go to the library, just go take a look at them.
Which library? The one down there?
University campus.
Yeah, the Northwestern Library.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Northwestern.
the Martin Library.
Yeah. One other thing about Jackson too, if you take a look at it, he's very tall, distinguished looking, really kind of the archetype of the Scots-Irish kind of frontiersman. Was he the first president to actually have an assassination attempt?
He
against
was
as well?
first one to survive an assassination attempt. Yeah.
And he was still standing. He had,
You mentioned some of the areas. Yeah. In fact, Davy Crockett, I believe, was present at the attempt.
Yeah.
He was at the Capitol building,
Okay.
and the pistol misfired because the powder was wet, and the guy that tried to kill Jackson was a lunatic. He thought he was the Prince of Wales or something like that, and so to that effect, he said, Jackson's usurping my throne. He's the king and all this stuff. I'm supposed to be the king. And Jackson, after the second pistol misfired, the guy pulled two on him, and then Jackson just closed the distance with his cane and just started wailing on this guy pretty much. And Crockett was in the crowd. I believe Crockett actually had to help pull Jackson off. So, okay, that's enough. He's subdued now. But yeah, But you mentioned the idea of the aristocracy. That was interesting. Jackson did represent a new American aristocracy, self-made aristocracy, because Jefferson didn't like Jackson. Thomas Jefferson talked about Jackson being crude, being backwoods. And whereas Jefferson was the old aristocracy, he was born to it. He deserved it, I guess. Whereas Jackson actually had to work for his. But yeah, that's a good point. And the self-made man and all that.
And of course, he was part of that nasty campaign, presidential campaign, was it 1828? Actually, the bad blood goes back to 1824.
Yeah, 24-20, the corrupt bargain. Yeah, we think our elections are dirty today. There was nothing worse than the 24-28 elections. They were cutthroat.
And his wife died around that time too. He never forgave his political opponents for that. But they said he was a very loyal man too to his followers. But he never forgave him for what happened after his wife passed away during the turmoil.
Is this a political correct venue, being that they take down his statue in Jackson Square and in New Orleans, and I mean, apparently anything with that kind of name on it, they try to do away with. Are you anticipating protests or anything?
Are we? We were going to have you take care of that. I got time to talk to you after.
Like with any figure, that controversies surround it.
I think it's fair to have a discussion about things as long as they're civil. And I think I would invite anybody to come that has a perspective, so long as they're civil about it. That's what university should be about, is discussing things. But
and my sister-in-law's background part of it's Cherokee Indian. I was impacted by that. So, but it's interesting. We were talking about the fact when he was on his deathbed, I think he became more religious over time too. And of course, he's near the end of his life. And it's interesting comments he was making with his slaves. It was almost kind of like a spiritual quality. Maybe, I guess he saw at the end of the day, you pretty much go back to the way he began.
he died a confirmed Presbyterian.
So
he did express an Orthodox Trinitarian Christian view of the world.
With the slaves too, it's kind of like we'll all be together. It's almost kind of like a sense, in the end, I guess we all end up, on the same page. So, but it kind of shows you the complexity of that. And I think that's true for any kind of figure.
I think most great people are contradictions. I think they are. That's what makes them great. Somewhat. Very few of us are. All of us are hypocrites, one way or the other. If we're really honest, all of us are hypocrites. And so it's easy to always point the finger at somebody else, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have flaws, of course. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was listening to Jeff Sessions this morning. He talked about the blatant disregard of the federal law by certain cities and states. And I was wondering, how would Andrew Jackson deal with something like that?
I think those people are glad they live in the 21st century and not the 19th century.
And it
Yeah,
shows
that's a
you-
good point. It's a very good
And it
point.
shows you too that this has been a recurring theme. In
Yes.
fact, both sides of the political aisle. I mean, I think
Mhm.
the Democratic Republicans probably 1790s. Well, it's kind of implied. With,
Mhm. Virginia, Kentucky resolutions. Yeah.
And then you had the Hartford Convention with the Federalists during the War of 1812. And then we have this South Carolina issue. And then time and again, you'll see, depending on who's in office, there's always some group that said, well, it's time to break away. You
Yeah.
know? But certainly Jackson was the first to have a serious threat of that. And again, he was able to seek a compromise too. There was a tariff issue that came up
Exactly.
that he was able to keep South Carolina. And of course, his rival was actually his former vice president, John C. Calhoun, and he was part of the secessionist movement.
Yeah.
What was his one regret? Jackson had two regrets.
Yeah.
What were they?
But he didn't hang John C. Calhoun,
Yeah.
and he didn't shoot
who was
Henry
it?
Clay.
Henry Clay.
Yeah. He wanted to hang and shoot. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Or
he-
shoot and hang. I forget which one. He wanted to kill both.
Yeah, those were his two regrets. But that shows you too, though, he was still able to resolve that peacefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a good question.
Yeah.
What would happen?
I always heard he
Yeah.
was a man with a fiery personality. That-
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, Rachel, his wife, was the only person they say that could disarm him. That if he said, if he went off half cocked and says, I'm going to go kill this guy, if Rachel says, no, I don't want you to do that, he'd say, okay. She was like the one person that could disarm him. But yeah, he was, like you said, he was volatile towards his enemies. He was loyal to his friends. But, you know, again, when you grow up on the frontier, life and death is ever present. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to not, it's easy for us to misinterpret things. And I'm not letting him off totally, but I think if we had lived the lives that sometimes people lived 150, 200 years ago, we would perhaps be different. We would.
Well, that's kind of like the way you look at him on a $20 bill.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's right. 20. Yeah.
He's the military hero.
He looks like somebody you wouldn't want to just shove around.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the power behind the throne sat in the White House as First Lady.
Well, unfortunately, she never made it, though. She died during the campaign. But yeah, she would have. During his life, though, you're right. In metaphorically,
Was that
she was.
was his niece basically kind of the first?
Yeah, he had a
niece
I believe it was
that
his
took care of
niece.
that.
Served as hostess,
Yeah.
and also Peggy Shipton did one of his.
Okay.
Jackson had actually one of the first interesting scandals. It was called the Peggy Eaton affair, and she was the wife of one of his. He was secretary. Her husband was Secretary of War. I can't remember, but long story short, there was an issue with her virtue, by virtue of when she had married her husband, about was she a bigamist, and the same argument had been made about Mrs. Jackson. And there was these rumors that she had had an affair, and Jackson, in a kind of fatherly way, took her under his wing and he protected her, and he saw her as a younger Rachel who was attacked by the press and by gossiping people, and so in a way, Jackson could be very fatherly, I guess would be the word. You know, he could show compassion, mercy, because he felt like this lady had been mistreated. That was kind of a positive side of it. He was taking her side and saying, hey, butt out, it's none of your business, leave her alone. So, and again, when he did that, you kind of had to take it seriously, because he might challenge you to a duel or something. And he was in, what, like 3 duels? I forget the number.
A handful. That was.
He was hit.
Yeah. One other thing I will mention too, well, we've talked about this. He had a very kind of informal inauguration back in 1829. I mean, actually March in that period, but had kind of a very simple kind of procession. And then they had kind of like a party at the White House. Like all these people kind of crashed at the White House.
He took everything that wasn't nailed down.
So you could never do that today.
Yeah, they were taking pictures off the walls.
Yeah.
This was the spoil system.
Yeah, people kind of were celebrating, and hey, we can all kind of come on into the people's house, and every other person in there running around, and breaking the dishes and taking them.
And then there's that other side of Jackson too, where he's not so common, because once he gets up there, he gets wealthy. He turns his back on in some ways, he doesn't support the squatters' rights bills, where free white men can go out and occupy federal lands. He's sort of, some people say he becomes in bed with the big land speculators. That's what Davy Crockett breaks with him over Indian removal and squatters' rights. And so that's another interpretation of Jackson. But I think he did. He's identified with the comment he did.
He's probably the first true strong
comment.
executive. Yeah. And by the way, we talk about partisanship too. Back up until about 1824, when things got really nasty. You almost had a virtual one-party system for maybe about 10 years. The Federalist Party had died out. Some of the ideas continued. The Democratic Republicans were the one party that dominated pretty much everything, maybe except for the court system. And then by the late 1820s, we have a split of the Democratic Republicans into the Democrats and the Whigs. And so he was a Democrat. But it's interesting, the 1820s was really kind of became this two-party system that we have today. The modern Democratic Party kind of came out of that. And then the Whigs later became the Republican Party. By the way, they called themselves Whigs, I guess, because of British tradition of opposing the monarch. It was King Andrew I, King Vito. But they were the future Republican Party, kind of in the Northeast, and then Jackson had kind of the West and the South. But that was really kind of a pivotal period in the late 1820s as the two parties diverged. We never really had a period like that where we had almost one party rule. And then Jackson comes along and we have this splitting up. So more things change, more they stay the same perhaps. It's just these different cycles, historical cycles. Any case, I'll throw that out there. Any questions? Ready for the pop quiz? Yeah. No, I was kidding. You didn't get 8 points here.
Tuesday the 13th at 11 o'clock.
The reception, if the invitation is at,
the foundation, the University Foundation sent out invitations to people. And if you receive one of those, please come at 11. If you didn't get one of those, then please come at 12 o'clock.
Well, I didn't get one.
You have to ask Peter.
Ask him.
Yes, sir.
Silly question. Good, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Said he was big in the state of Tennessee and all that. Did he start the University of Vanderbilt? Or was that? That was another one. Which president founded Vanderbilt?
I'm not sure on
I
that one.
couldn't say.
I think of Jefferson with Virginia. But
Yeah.
I think
I couldn't say. I don't know that.
I'm not sure on that. I have to look that up.
One of
Clinton.
I don't think so.
Yes, better not on that
Maybe
one.
a little more ancient than that.
Jackson wasn't much of a fan of education, though, per se, not formal education. It really wasn't his deal, so. Yes, sir.
What about, was Jackson, was he a big proponent of manifest destiny? Was that a little early or?
Yeah, I think that the concept, I mean, some of the roots of it come out of the 1840s, but I think certainly he saw opportunities for land for at least for the white populations. I think that would be, but that wouldn't be quite the manifest destiny of going beyond maybe the Mississippi, beyond the Louisiana territories. But by the 1840s, that idea begins to become more concrete. But certainly he saw land, maybe Texas or
He wanted Texas.
he wanted Texas, but yeah, the articulation at that point would be a little bit later. But you kind of see this now moving in. What was the old Southwest was the old, the South, Alabama and that and so forth. So you have some tribal groups that are there.
President during the Mexican War.
She had Polk, the Mexican War. President Polk, I think we had a guest speaker on that. And really, Polk is one other. That idea becomes much more articulated, manifest destiny.
Zachary Taylor was the general then.
Yeah. But Polk, 1840s, absolutely. Polk nearly doubled the size of the country.
In one term. Which was good presidents who could do stuff in one term. They always said, give me another 4 years so I can waste more time. Right?
Double the size of the
But Polk
country
could do it in
in 4
one
years.
term, and he did. He got it all done. But the last thing I would conclude with this, if please y'all look at the website, our Institute website. You can find some of our previous videos we've done, and just you can find out what we're doing, and I encourage you to look at that.
Especially the University YouTube link
Yeah.
too. They have several more recent presidential lecture series that we've been able to record. And I think we're going to be recording hopefully this
Yeah,
one as
we're
well.
gonna do this
It
one.
takes a little while to get it posted up, but we do have all the previous ones from the last 5 years. Yeah.
Thank you guys very
We've got a
much.
class coming up, so thank you so much.